The text from my wife Lila arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was finishing up rewiring the kitchen outlet she'd been nagging me about for months. "Doug, I think we should open our relationship. But only for me. You understand, right? I need space to grow." I stared at my phone for exactly 30 seconds, then typed back, "Fair enough." What Lila didn't understand was that I'd been expecting this for weeks. The late-night yoga sessions, the new workout clothes, the way she'd started pronouncing namaste like she was auditioning for a meditation app. My wife had found herself a personal trainer, and apparently, he'd been training more than just her downward dog. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, where Lila was pretending to sleep. Her phone buzzed constantly on the nightstand, probably her best friend Ginny, waiting for updates on how the conversation went. I grabbed my wallet, my tools, and headed back downstairs. By morning, Lila learned what open really meant when she couldn't access our joint accounts, couldn't start her car, and discovered the locks had been changed. She'd wanted freedom. Now she could try living without a cent of my money, a key to my house, or a single word from me. I'd given her exactly what she asked for. The pounding on the front door started around 8 a.m. I was in my workshop, organizing my tools and enjoying the first peaceful morning I'd had in months. Through the basement window, I could see Lila's yoga pants and her ridiculous designer sneakers, the ones she'd bought for hiking but had never seen a trail. "Doug, open this door right now. We need to talk." I cranked up my radio and kept working. Talking was what got us into this mess. Lila talked about finding herself and exploring her spirituality, while she was actually exploring Seth Parmenter's bachelor condo 3 nights a week. Seth. 28 years old, all protein powder and fake confidence, driving a souped-up Honda Civic like he was starring in his own action movie. The kind of guy who wore tank tops to grocery stores and called everyone bro. The kind of guy my wife apparently found irresistible. My neighbor, Mrs. Kavanaugh, appeared at her fence around noon, watering her roses with theatrical precision. "Morning, Doug," she called out, her voice dripping with the kind of satisfaction that comes from witnessing neighborhood drama. "Quite a bit of commotion over there this morning. Everything all right?" "Just peachy, Mrs. C." Lila's exploring new living arrangements. She nodded knowingly. "Ah, well, I did notice all those young men coming and going lately. That one with the loud car especially, very energetic." Mrs. Kavanaugh had been watching our house like a security camera for the past 2 months. Nothing happened on Maple Street without her knowledge, and she'd been dropping hints about Lila's visitors for weeks. "Thanks for keeping an eye on things," I said. "Oh, it's no trouble at all." Quite entertaining, actually. That afternoon, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Lila had left her laptop behind in her rush to find space to grow, and she'd never been particularly careful about passwords. Her birthday, followed by our anniversary year. Original. What I found made my jaw clench. Months of text messages with Seth, planning their secret meetings, photos I definitely didn't need to see. And worse, conversations with Ginny about how boring and predictable I was, how she deserved better, how she was planning to handle the Doug situation once she figured out her next move. But the real kicker was buried in her photo gallery, a selfie of Seth in our garage, leaning against my vintage motorcycle like he owned it, my bike. The 1973 Honda CB 750 I'd spent 3 years restoring. That's when I knew this wasn't just about marriage problems anymore. This was war. I drove to the Anchor that evening, the kind of dive bar where the beer was cold and the bartender minded his own business. Big Ed had been running the place for 20 years, and he knew everyone's secrets. More importantly, he knew how to keep his mouth shut when it mattered. "Rough day?" Ed asked, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden bar. "You could say that." "Tell me something, Ed. You know a guy named Seth Parmenter?" Ed's expression darkened. "Personal trainer? Drives like he's compensating for something?" "That's the one." "Yeah, I know him. He's got a reputation around here. Likes married women, especially ones with something to lose. This is about Lila, isn't it? I nodded, taking a long drink. Sorry, Doug. Guy's a real piece of work. Been through half the yoga moms in town. Always the same pattern. Tells them they're special, that their husbands don't understand them, then moves on when things get complicated. Any advice? Ed leaned closer. Don't do anything stupid. But if you're looking to make a point, well, sometimes the best revenge is just letting people see who someone really is. My old friend Roy walked in around 9, still wearing his security guard uniform from the mall. Roy had been a cop for 15 years before retiring early, and he still had that cop instinct for trouble. Heard through the grapevine you're having some domestic issues, he said, settling onto the bar stool next to me. News travels fast. Small town. Look, you want some free advice? Don't do anything that'll land you in jail? But making someone's life uncomfortable? That's not illegal, as long as you're smart about it. Roy had always been the strategic thinker in our group. While I was the guy who fixed things with his hands, Roy fixed problems with his brain. What are you thinking? I asked. Well, if someone was hypothetically having an affair and they were using your property to facilitate said affair, you might have some options. Legal ones. The next morning, I put Roy's advice into action. I started small, disabled Lila's car by removing the spark plugs, changed the garage door code, and moved all her yoga equipment to a storage unit across town. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Namaste, but not in my house. By noon, my phone was buzzing with angry texts from Ginny. Doug, you're being completely unreasonable. Lila just needs space to figure things out. You're making her look crazy at yoga class. Perfect. That was exactly the point. I'd found something else interesting in Lila's phone records. She'd been using a burner phone for her communications with Seth. Probably thought she was being clever. But she'd left the phone in her car, and since I still had the spare key, well, finders keepers. I sent Seth a text from Lila's burner. Meet me at the storage unit on Industrial Road. Unit 47. Bring an overnight bag. Time to make this official. Then I drove to the storage facility and waited. Seth's Honda Civic pulled up at exactly 6 p.m., engine revving like he was announcing his arrival to the world. He parked near the storage units, engine still running, probably expecting a quick romantic encounter before heading back to his bachelor pad. I watched from behind a row of units as Seth walked up to Unit 47, looking around nervously. He tried the door, locked, obviously, since I had the only key. He pulled out his phone, probably trying to call Lila. That's when I stepped out of the shadows. Looking for something? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Seth spun around, his face going pale under his fake tan. Doug! Hey, man, Lila said. Lila said what exactly? He stammered for a few seconds, clearly trying to come up with a story that didn't involve admitting he was there for a secret hookup. She said she had some stuff stored here and asked me to pick it up. Interesting. See, the thing is, Seth, I'm the one paying for this storage unit. And I'm pretty sure my wife doesn't need her personal trainer to pick up her old Christmas decorations. Seth tried to look tough, puffing out his chest like he did in his gym selfies. Look, man, this is between you and Lila. I don't want any trouble. Too late for that, don't you think? I pulled out my phone and showed him the selfie of himself in my garage. Nice bike, right? Took me 3 years to restore that engine. His face went red. That's not... she invited me over. To my house, to pose with my motorcycle, while I was at work. I stepped closer. You know what I think, Seth? I think you're the kind of guy who takes things that don't belong to him. That's when Seth made his mistake. He pulled out his own phone and started dialing. Yeah, Chad? I need you and Vince to come down to Industrial Road. Some guy's hassling me. I couldn't help but laugh. You're calling backup? What are you, 12? Within 10 minutes, a beat-up pickup truck pulled into the parking lot, and 2 guys who looked like they'd failed out of community college climbed out. Chad and Vince, apparently, Seth's gym buddies, all muscle and no brain. "This the guy giving you trouble?" Chad asked, cracking his knuckles like he was in a bad movie. "Yeah, this is Lila's husband. He's being unreasonable." I looked at the three of them and shook my head. "You know what, Seth? You're right. I am being unreasonable. Here I am, getting upset about my wife sleeping with some guy who needs his friends to fight his battles." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small device Roy had given me, a key fob that would trigger the storage facility's alarm system. But you know what's really unreasonable? Breaking and entering. I pressed the button. Immediately, alarms started blaring throughout the facility. Lights flashed, and I could hear security systems activating in units all around us. "Oops," I said, grinning. "Looks like someone triggered the security system." Seth panicked, trying to get back to his car, but in his haste, he got his foot caught as I accidentally slammed the storage unit door. He yelped in pain, hopping on one foot. "Sorry about that," I said, not sounding sorry at all. "These doors can be tricky." Seth's phone rang, probably Lila, wondering why he hadn't answered her texts. In his pain and confusion, he fumbled the phone, and it went skittering across the asphalt. "Whoops," I said, and stepped on it with my work boot. The screen shattered with a satisfying crunch. "You crazy bastard!" Seth yelled, but the approaching sound of sirens cut him off. Officer Murphy arrived within minutes, probably expecting to find a break-in in progress. Instead, he found three guys standing around looking guilty, while I calmly explained that I was just checking on my storage unit when the alarm went off. "These gentlemen said they were looking for someone," I told Murphy. "But I think they got confused about the address." Seth tried to explain about meeting Lila, but without his phone and with no way to prove she'd asked him to come, his story sounded exactly like what it was. A lie. "I think you boys better move along," Murphy said, clearly not interested in dealing with whatever drama was unfolding. Seth limped back to his car, Chad and Vince following behind him like confused puppies. As they drove away, I could hear them arguing about whose fault it was. I waved goodbye. "Drive safe, Seth. Wouldn't want you to get hurt." When I got home, Lila was waiting on the front porch with Ginny and a business card from some lawyer's office. "We need to talk," Lila said, her voice shaking with anger. "I thought you needed space," I replied, unlocking the front door. "How's that working out for you?" "Don't be cute, Doug. You can't just lock me out of my own house." "Actually, I can. It's my house, my name on the mortgage, my money paying for it." I stepped inside and turned to face her. "But don't worry. I hear Seth has a nice place." Ginny stepped forward, trying to play peacemaker. "Doug, this is all just a misunderstanding. Lila made a mistake, but you're taking this too far." "Am I, Ginny? Tell me, how long have you known about the affair?" Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the screenshots I'd taken from Lila's messages. "Really? Because according to these texts, you've been helping coordinate their meetings for months. In fact, it looks like you recommended Seth's services to several of your friends." The color drained from Ginny's face completely. In a small town like ours, reputation was everything, and Ginny's whole identity was built around being the moral center of the yoga mom community. "You can't prove anything," she said, but her voice was shaking. "Maybe not. But I don't need to prove anything. I just need to let people draw their own conclusions." The next day, I put my plan into full effect. I'd made copies of all the relevant text messages and photos, and I started sharing them strategically. Not publicly, that would have been too obvious. Instead, I sent them to a few key people in town, the kind of people who couldn't keep a secret if their lives depended on it. By afternoon, the story was spreading through the community like wildfire. Lila's yoga classes were suddenly half empty. Ginny's phone was ringing constantly with concerned friends, wanting to know if the rumors were true. But the real masterstroke came when I had Roy help me with a little automotive maintenance on Seth's Honda. Nothing dangerous, just some spray paint that read "Open Season" across the hood and 4 mysteriously flat tires. When Seth discovered his car in the gym parking lot, there was already a small crowd gathered around it, taking pictures. His reputation as the town's smooth-talking ladies' man was officially over. That evening, Lila showed up at the Anchor, probably hoping to confront me on neutral ground. Instead, she found herself facing a bar full of people who'd heard all about her spiritual journey with Seth. "You're destroying my life!" she screamed at me across the crowded bar. "I'm not destroying anything," I replied calmly. "I'm just letting people see who you really are." She lunged toward me, but Big Ed stepped between us. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "This is insane." "Doug, you can't just ruin everything because you're hurt." I stood up and faced her directly. "You wanted an open relationship, Lila. Well, now it's open. Now everyone can see exactly what kind of person you are, and what kind of person Seth is." The bar had gone completely quiet, everyone watching our confrontation like it was a reality TV show. "You asked for space to grow," I continued. "So here's your space. Grow all you want. Just do it somewhere else." Lila started crying, probably hoping for sympathy from the crowd, but the damage was done. In a small town, being known as a cheater was social suicide, and being known as someone who cheated with the town's resident sleazeball was even worse. She ran out of the bar, and through the window I could see Seth waiting in his vandalized car, engine running. But I wasn't done yet. The final act came 3 days later. Roy had helped me install a perfectly legal security system in my house. Audio only, nothing invasive, just enough to protect my property. What I hadn't expected was how useful it would be when Lila and Seth decided to break in to retrieve her belongings. I was watching from Mrs. Kavanaugh's living room when they pulled up at midnight, thinking they could sneak in undetected. Seth had a crowbar, and Lila had a key she thought still worked. What they didn't know was that Roy had rigged the house with a few extra surprises. As soon as they broke the lock on the back door, every car alarm on the street went off simultaneously, triggered by a remote system Roy had installed. The noise was incredible. Dogs started barking, lights came on in every house, and neighbors began pouring out onto their porches to see what was happening. I stepped out of Mrs. Kavanaugh's house with my phone already recording, broadcasting live to the neighborhood Facebook group. Well, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Look what we have here. My wife and her boyfriend breaking into my house." Lila and Seth were caught in the glare of a dozen porch lights, looking like deer in headlights. "It's not breaking in," Lila shouted. "It's my house, too." "Actually, it's not," I replied, still filming. "You see, folks, my wife here decided she wanted an open relationship. What she didn't mention was that she and Seth here were planning to frame me for domestic abuse so they could take my house." That got everyone's attention. "That's not true," Seth yelled, but his voice cracked. "Really?" I pulled out a small speaker and pressed play. Suddenly, Lila and Seth's voices filled the night air, recorded from their planning session 2 days earlier. "He's such a sap," Lila's voice said clearly. "We'll say he hit me, I'll get the house in the divorce, and you can move in with me." "What about his bike?" Seth's voice replied. "That thing's worth like $15,000. "That's yours too, baby. Doug won't know what hit him." The crowd gasped. Mrs. Kavanaugh actually applauded. Lila's face went white. That's illegal recording." "Actually, it's not," Roy said, stepping out of the crowd. "Single-party consent state. Doug had every right to record conversations in his own home. Officer Murphy arrived for the second time that week, but this time, he wasn't dealing with a confused storage facility incident. This time, he had clear evidence of attempted breaking and entering, plus conspiracy to commit fraud. "You folks want to press charges?" Murphy asked me. I looked at Lila and Seth, both of them looking pathetic and defeated in the glare of all those lights, surrounded by neighbors who now knew exactly who they were. "You know what, Officer Murphy? I think they've learned their lesson." I turned to address the crowd that had gathered, practically the entire neighborhood. If anyone's looking for a yoga instructor or a personal trainer, I announced, I hear their schedules just opened up. Lila burst into tears and ran toward Seth's damaged car. Seth followed, limping slightly from his storage unit encounter. As they drove away, I could hear the neighbors talking, laughing, already turning the night's events into the story they'd tell for years to come. Mrs. Kavanaugh walked over and patted my shoulder. "Well done, Doug. Well done indeed." I looked around at my neighbors, my house, my life that I'd fought to keep, and smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's just letting people see the truth. I walked up to my front door, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. For the first time in months, I was home alone, and it felt perfect.